Go ahead and turn to Genesis 1 if you'd like. Genesis chapter 1. We're going to talk about the new birth tonight, but we're going to begin with the fact that we have a physical life. That's a given, because here we are. We're talking, or I'm talking, you're listening, and we've made it in here. So our life is real. The idea of our physical life is real. God made everything that there is. And in that process of creation in Genesis chapter 1 and 2, there is this creation of man. This whole concept of God's amazing power is demonstrated by creation, where He created everything from nothing. But it's interesting that He created man out of the dust of the ground. Now, I don't know if that was God making a point, saying that you're nothing but dust, and so when you die, you'll return to dust. I think that's a pretty good point that He made, if that's his point, that you really ought not think too highly of yourself, because you're really not much more than dust. But still, God made humankind. We are His creation. Now, if you want to go back, your ancestors, as far back as you can go all the way back to Noah, and then you still got to go back, all the way back, and we're all connected with Adam and Eve. So you've got this physical connection. I don't know how far you can trace your ancestry back, but I can't go back very far with mine. They just kind of disappear. They kind of appear and then they disappear. So I can't go very far back. But one thing that we all know is that we are all descendants of the first man and the first woman. Life is we have a physical life. We have a physical body. We exist in this physical world with a physical body. So if I were to ask you, how would you define life? Because we're going to talk about the new birth, which is going to bring us to this point of talking about life in that new birth. So if I were to ask you, what is life? What would be a good answer to that question? What is life? This could be a deep philosophical, or it could be just some simple answer. What do you think?
The opposite of death.
Oh, okay. Like I said, it could be very deep or it could be shallow. I don't know. Somebody said that life is the span of time between your birth and your death. That's life. Well, that's a pretty good definition, except if you're just defining your physical existence, that's a pretty good definition, isn't it? Life is your existence between, well, we'll say 9 months before your birth and the day that you die, because when you die, spirit leaves your body. Your body, as I began with, your body's going to return to the dust, and it's going to be, well, that's a whole different study about the resurrection. But so, any other ideas? What is life?
How about the breath of God?
The breath of God. Hey, that's a good one, Randy, because the idea of life coming into this body of clay is that God breathed into him the breath of life. So that's probably the best answer I've ever heard. Okay, that's a part of that, isn't it? Part of being alive and being in a physical body is that God created. What about James' statement? Now, I know he's not trying to define life, but he says life is a vapor. He's not trying to define life. What's he doing there? He's talking about the brevity of life, isn't he? Life is here. Before you blink, life is gone. So he's describing that. But James does say that it's like a vapor. It's here for a little while, then it vanishes away. James 4:14. So according to the Bible, one thing we know is that this physical body is something that exists because God created this physical body for those that would have a relationship with Him. His creating process that He started back in Genesis chapter 1, all of these 6 days of creation were fascinating and a demonstration of God's power, a demonstration of God's glory, and the culmination of that then is this creation of mankind, which we sometimes describe that as being the crown of His creation. That idea of having demonstrated a new facet of His power by being able to create a human and the uniqueness of the human that is between the human and the animal kingdom and all other things that He had created. We have this ability to reason. We have the ability to choose. We have the ability to know right and wrong and good and evil. We have this ability to follow instructions and do all of those things. And no matter what the animal kingdom learns or adapts to, we still have this great advantage over every other part and every other part of creation, because we have all of the things that make us uniquely human beings, plus we have this unique thing about us that makes us be able to be described as being like God, which is we are eternal beings. We have a spirit. We are not just physical, but we are also spiritual beings. As a matter of fact, that's one of the reasons that I wanted to start with this whole idea of life, is because you can't really talk about this idea of being reborn or having this new birth without talking about the first birth. We're talking about the first birth, and that is that we have been born into this world. No matter if you want to say that we came into this world as a result of our mother and our father, it's still a creation of God. God put that natural process in motion, and here we are today because God purposed for us to be here. It seems as if, from the way that Jeremiah described his having been chosen for the work of God as a prophet of God, that he was chosen while he was even in his mother's womb. So there you have that kind of summation, I think, about the purpose and the goal and the things that make us unique, as we have been given this great opportunity to be in a fleshly body. Randy's statement was from Genesis chapter 2, verse 7. God breathed into man, and man became a living soul, the eternal part of man. The soul will never die. The soul is a central part of who we are. I think one of the mistakes that we've made in society is that we have been taught, we have been convinced that we are only we are not unique. We are only a part of an animal kingdom, and therefore we've started to behave that way. But we are creatures with a soul. We have been created with that soul, with that spiritual being that makes us like God in that sense, that we will be eternal in our existence. So we have, as the Bible teaches us, this great foundation for the physical body, the physical life that we live, the uniqueness of this physical body that mankind inhabits, and also the uniqueness of having been given life by the breath of God, and also being spiritual in nature and having the ability, or not an ability, but having that nature to live forever, and we will never cease to exist as we look forward to the future after this body is dead. Paul would talk about this earthly tabernacle. I'm not sure about the other translations, but I know King James usually refers to it as, from that perspective, this earthly tabernacle. That describes the physical world. But Paul would also talk about how that we need to focus on those things that are not temporary, because everything that is physical is temporary. The things that we know, the things that we see, touch, taste, smell, those things are all temporary. Everything that we know has a birth date or a manufactured date. We were talking about lawnmowers a while ago. The old John Deere I've got that won't run anymore. You raise the hood up, and under there it's got a manufactured date on it. Manufactured in such and such date. Your car's got one. Raise the hood, probably a sticker right there. Got a manufactured date. Well, everything we know is temporary because it's physical. We can touch it. We can see it. It's temporary. And from that perspective, then, Paul would say the things that we ought to focus on then would be those things that are eternal, which are not things that have a birth date or have a manufactured date or are in this physical world. The Bible also talks a lot about this length of days. It's interesting to me that you have, Methuselah, 969, something like that. Am I close? I'm pretty close, yeah. Then you have the length of days becoming shorter. Psalm 90 describes 70 years as being the length of life. The lifespan in the United States right now, anybody have an idea what it is? It was 78. Yeah, I think. Right. Yeah. If you lump women in there, we have a longer lifespan. All mankind does, but women usually a little longer than men. But I think it's 79 3/4, something like that. But nevertheless, you've got this average lifespan in the United States. But I contend that we sometimes measure the quality of a life by the number of years, but I don't think that's the way you measure the quality of life. I don't think that really has anything to do with the quality of life, because the quality of life should be measured by not the years, but what you put into those years you had. What good you did, what difference you made, what influence you were on the world that you live in. Okay, so next, before I go on, any observations, any questions, or maybe something that came to your mind as we talk about life, this physical body? The purpose of life, that's been a debate for quite some time, hasn't it? The Greeks would say, eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow you die. Budweiser didn't come up with that, by the way. Grab all the gusto you can, for you only go around once in life. The Greeks had a handle on that one a long time before Budweiser came up with that one. As a matter of fact, the Greeks didn't even come up with it, did they? No, they may have, yeah. But yeah. I'm sure they had a form of it as they worshiped some of their gods of the yeast and whatever. I'm sure they had some forms of it. But as far back as we can go, even in the history of God's people and God's interaction with His people, it seems that the central focus of human beings has been themselves. I want to do what I want to do because I want to do it. I want to feel good. I want something that will help me feel fulfilled, or that seems to be something that we deal with as human beings. I guess you could call that human nature, but that whole idea of why am I here and what is my purpose, and it seems that it oftentimes goes back to I am here to be happy and have a good time and enjoy myself and be satisfied and happy. And as a result of that, then our lifestyle reflects what we believe our purpose for being here is. Where do we get that idea about that being the purpose of our life? Where do we get that? Where does that come from? Well, it usually comes from somebody who has written a textbook that's being taught in one of our universities. It usually comes from somebody who writes a self-help book that decides that I'm going to be the one that's going to tell you how you can be happy, how you can feel complete, how you can live your life to its fullest. And believe it or not, it even comes from the mouths of some so-called preachers who tell you how to live a fulfilled life and be a happy life and all that. So the whole idea of how do you live a life that is fulfilling to yourself and also pleasing to God? Well, that is the conundrum, I guess. Because you've got so much teaching in the world that's been going on for so long that pulls people away into this theory of if I'm going to feel whole, if I'm going to feel good, if I'm going to be happy, then that means I've got to do what I want to do. I've got to do what pleases me and gives me pleasure and happiness. And I think the great question then is, since we are not here, since the purpose of our life, since the real purpose of it is not for ourselves, then where do we find the answer? Well, we find the answer in Scripture, and we could go to Mark chapter 8, verses 36 and 37. Somebody find that for me and read that for me. Mark 8, 36 and 37. Anybody?
For what will it profit a man if he gains the whole world and loses his own soul? For what will a man give in exchange for his soul? For whoever is ashamed of me and my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, of him the Son of Man also will be ashamed when he comes in the glory of his Father with the holy angels.
Okay, thank you, Tommy. The verses there speak very clearly of the fact that there are those who will work to gain things that will allow them to be successful in the world's eyes. The phrase is gain the whole world. So you're talking about fulfillment through gain from a worldly perspective. Now that doesn't necessarily mean you're accumulating wealth, though, does it? The application could go further than that, much deeper than that, because if your focus is on something else, whether it's fame, fortune, pleasure, hedonism, whatever it might be, if that's your goal, if that's your focus, then that would fit right here, wouldn't it? What does it matter if you are pleased physically every day of your life for 76 years? What does it matter? And you lose your soul. So you could plug anything in there that we might seek after, and it's going to still mean the same thing, and that is that if we lose our soul because we made the choice to deny the fulfillment of life coming from God and His Word, then we're going to be outcast and we're going to have lost everything because of our pursuit of something else. because of our pursuit of something that was not godly. Specifically, gain the whole world. If you gain everything in the world, lose your soul. All right, anything? Any observation?
Word purpose in Ecclesiastes, where Solomon talked about that, and he said in Ecclesiastes 3, and about verse 16 starting, he said, "Moreover, I saw under the sun the place of judgment, that wickedness was there, and the place of righteousness, that iniquity was there." You know, so whether you're good or bad, you've got bad and good in you. I said in my heart, God shall judge the righteous and the wicked, for there is a time there for every purpose and for every work. I said in my heart concerning the estate of the sons of men, that God might make himself known, and that they might see that they themselves are beasts. We're just nothing but beasts compared to God, you know. For that which, in other words, we're like animals. That concept of that which befalleth the sons of men befalls beasts. Even one thing befalls them. As one dies, so the other dies. Yea, they all have one breath, so that a man has no more preeminence above a beast, for all his vanity. And all go to one place, all of the dust, and all to the dust return. Who knows the spirit of man goes upward, the spirit of beast goes downward to the earth. Therefore, I perceive that there is nothing better than that a man should rejoice in his own works, for that's his portion. Who shall bring him to see what should be after him? So you might as well just live it up and have a good time. You don't know what's going to happen, you wait until you're going to die.
Right. Well, and Randy quotes or reads from Ecclesiastes 3 about 15 and following, and the observation is clear from Solomon's writings there that the choices that he made were based upon the sensual, the things that were trying that he was trying to find to fulfill himself, and there's nothing there. There's nothing there that fulfilled him, and we could come all the way to the end of the book, chapter 12, and he kind of sums it up by saying, you know, all of that's vanity. All of that is vanity without the Lord, because the whole duty of man is to fear God and keep His commandments. That seems to be the summation of it. Thank you, Randy.
Things that he was really striving for. If you look at them, seven of them the same things we're striving for.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't work.
Yeah, that's true. Tommy brings out that in chapter 2 that Solomon talks about things that he was striving for. Long list there, and most of those are things that we're still striving for as human beings. And you can't find fulfillment in those things. You cannot find that which will last. And I'm convinced that Solomon wrote this in his older years when he had had time to reflect and look back on all those bad choices he made. And finally he says, all of that was useless. All of that was vanity because I didn't put God in that. And
he was the wisest man in the world.
Yes. And yet he didn't follow his own father's instructions, because when David talked to him and basically turned the kingdom over to him, his instruction was clear, and that is, son, follow God's commandments. Do what God said, and it'll be well with you all of your days.
Why is the argument still going to fail? You know, God's got to have God.
Yep, that's true. Thankfully, he had time to see the error of his ways. So we sometimes describe this idea of the natural man and use words to talk about the lusts that we have as being in the body, and even refers to there, as Randy read from Ecclesiastes. I was thinking about all of these things that we sometimes pursue are things that we pursue because we are in a natural body. We pursue those. Some of those things bring us pleasure for a time. Some of those things bring us great satisfaction for a time. And that's what Solomon said. They were fun for a while, but it all breaks down. It all always breaks down. It never ever lasts. So you have this basic idea from the Bible that we have a fleshly body, that there is great potential within this physical body, and as a matter of fact, the body that we have is supposed to glorify God. In places like where you read from Jesus' words in Matthew chapter 5, 13 through 16, he describes that as disciples of the Lord, we are to be an influence in our world. He describes that influence as if it were light dispelling darkness and salt influencing everything that it touches. So we are to be an influence in the world. And as a result of that, he says, so that God might be glorified. That's the end result. So our bodies are not evil. Our bodies are not bad. Our bodies are made by God, and we have such great potential. And one of the things that we have to move past is the fact that there are a lot of people who think we are born evil, and we are evil, and so we got to beat the evil out of us, or whatever we have to do. We can use our bodies for good or evil. We make choices. We make decisions in our mind, and oftentimes those decisions are clouded by our desires, our wants, our attitude, our lack of relationship or faith or connection or commitment or whatever it might be to God. And sometimes, all the time, that influences our decision-making process. We flirt with sin. We see how close we can get to it. We enjoy it. We like it. It gives us a rush of adrenaline. And as a result of all of that, then we, in turn, make bad choices. We make those poor choices. And so therein lies the issue that the Bible deals with. God has dealt with this issue of those who would rebel against Him from Genesis chapter 2 all the way until Jesus Christ comes and dies on the cross. That's why Jesus died on the cross. It's because we, as human beings, have made the choice to do things God said are sin. We've made the choice to not follow His will, or to go against what He said was right, and to do that which He said was wrong. And as a result of that, that puts us in the category of being sinners, separated from God because of our sins. Now, the greatest thing that has ever been taught to me was that in spite of my rebellion and my hatred of God, and I use hatred in that way that Romans chapter 5 uses it, that I was an enemy of God. I would never curse God and die like Job's wife wanted him to do. I would never have done that. But the things that I did demonstrated a life that was in contrast to what God's will was for me, and as a result of that, then I was separated from God because of my sinful choices. So the greatest thing anybody ever told me was that God still loved me even when I was rebellious and an enemy of His. He still loved me. He loved the worst sinner that has ever lived so much that He would give His only Son to die for that worst sinner that ever lived. He loved you, me, everybody that ever lived, sinner, all, I guess I should say sinners all, But the best news is that God still loved us. He loved us in spite. Is there a song, He loves us in spite of my... Oh, Mama loved me in spite of my wicked ways. That was a Merle Haggard, wasn't it? Yeah. Mama loved me in spite of my wicked ways. Well, a mama and God going to love you in spite of your wicked ways. That is the good news. The good news of Jesus Christ. Now, from my perspective, I did not appreciate the good news of the death, burial, and resurrection appropriately until I understood how bad the bad news was. The bad news is so bad because as a sinner, I am destined to spend eternal separation from my God. That's bad news. The bad news is that because of my choices, my sin, my rebellion against God, I will not only spend eternity separated from Him, but I'll spend eternity in a place that is exactly the opposite of heaven. Now, I don't know about all of the specifics about what hell and heaven's, either one's going to be like. I know that heaven's going to be glorious and hell's going to be the worst that my mind could imagine, and then some. I don't know how to describe it. We could talk about fire and brimstone and devil and all of that, but I don't know how all that's going to work together. But I just know I don't want to go there. So the bad news is bad. The bad news is so bad that when I think about it, it makes the hair stand up on the back of my neck. That I am destined to an eternal existence out of the presence of my God. That's bad news. Verse after verse talks about being separated from God because of sin. Isaiah 59, 1 and 2 describes the fact. Now, Isaiah is writing to these Israelites, and he's writing about these Israelites. And this statement is made in two different ways, but it means the same thing. Your iniquities are separated between you and your God. Your sins are separated between you and your God. So here you have relationship. Your sin separates you from God. That's bad news. That's horrible news. That's the worst news you'd ever get. You think you've gotten bad news in your lifetime? You hadn't. Till you get that news that your sin has separated between you and your God. You are separated because of your sin, your choices. Not because God made a choice, because of your choices. I'm separated from God because of my choices. So that's the worst news. That's the bad news. Now, I knew that news. But till I understood how bad the bad news was, it was only then that I was able to see how good the good news really is. How many times have you quoted John 3:16? I mean, for God so loved the world. I won't finish it because you can finish it in your own mind. Did we comprehend it, or we just say it? Do we grasp the seriousness and the true meaning of what's going on in John 3:16? Because we've said it so many times from a little tyke and up, we memorized it. Do we just kind of gloss over it by saying it quickly and not grasp the fact that God loved me so much that He gave His only Son? That's the good news. Bad news, I'm separated from God because of my sins. I am destined for eternal punishment. I'm destined to be separated from God for all of eternity because of my sin. Good news, God loved me even in my sin. God loved me so much that He provided a way for me to get back into relationship with Him. God loved me so much that He provided the sacrifice, which was the Son of God, His only Son, His perfect Son, the perfect sacrifice. And as a result of Him loving us so much and giving us that perfect sacrifice that would be the once for all sacrifice for all sin, for all time. It's just mind blowing to think of and to come to terms with that fact, that though I'm separated from God because of my sin, God loved me so much that He provided a way for me to have relationship with Him. Now, here's what's stunning about that to me, is that even though I stink as a sinner, I am wretched and filthy and dirty and nasty, God still wants me. He still wants a relationship with me. He wants to pull me into the family and adopt me as His son, even though I'm in that condition. That's pretty amazing, isn't it? I mean, almost makes me want to shout, because it's the most fascinating thing in the world to think about the fact that God could and would love me, a sinner, when I am a rebel and I'm against Him, and I've done everything I could to disappoint Him and hurt Him and go against His will, yet God says, I still want you back. I want that relationship. One of the greatest books in all of the Bible that describes this perfectly is the book of Haggai, where you have this play going on that God's working out. So it shows that the love that I have for you is the way that I've demonstrated it through this prophet and his situation. I love you even though you've prostituted yourself out, even though you've gone after other gods. I want relationship with you even though you've turned your back on me and walked away. Well, that is good news, isn't it? We walked away, we turned our back, we rebelled against Him, we were enemies of His, we chose something else over Him, and God still says, I love you anyway. Not many of us. Not many. I'm sure most of us can think of the most patient person we've ever known in our lives. But they also have a stopping point. There's a point when your patience, my grandma used to say my patience is wearing thin. We all know what that means, right? Yeah. Good point. So I guess next week we'll talk about the new birth, since I spent all this time laying some groundwork and some foundation for the need for this new birth and the opportunity that God supplies for us to have the ability to experience a new birth. So we'll do that next week.